So after missing basically the cultural phenomenon known as the Harry Potter book series by J.K. Rowling and the movies, I knew about them, of course, obviously. How could you not know about them? But I never bothered to actually read the books or see the films. It was just something that I was sort of aware of. And then this year got interested in actually checking everything out and finding out what this Harry Potter phenomenon was all about. And I found a canon of fantastic literature, fantastic books with just overwhelmingly good themes about the triumph of good over evil, about love, about all kind of good things. And I'd never really known this before about the Harry Potter series. It had always been some fantastical, magical thing that I knew existed but never paid a lot of attention to. And so I started to read the books and to see the films, and the most recently completed book, well, actually I have completed Half-Blood Prince now, but of course immediately before that you had the Order of the Phoenix. And the Order of the Phoenix is a volume in which, you know, the book and the movie, in which everything is just sort of going to hell in a handbasket. This wonderful world that Harry Potter has become a part of as a young man is just sort of falling apart. Of course, Harry's parents had been killed when he was very young by Lord Voldemort, and he became an orphan and didn't learn that he was a wizard until he was approximately 11 years old. Then he goes to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and discovers this wonderful world that he never knew anything about. He has a new home, he has new friends, but Voldemort, for reasons that become obvious later, it all has to do with a prophecy made long ago, but Voldemort is determined to kill Harry because Harry was responsible for him being defeated at the time that he tried to kill Harry's parents, and he was existed from that point on in a very diminished form. He lost all his power, and he'd been the most feared dark wizard in the world, the most feared one ever, and he ran amok doing evil in the wizarding world, in the muggle world, and this attempt to kill Harry had backfired him and put him into this reduced sort of subhuman condition, although he was still surviving but in a really bad state. And Harry was apparently responsible for that. Actually, love was responsible for that, but we'll get to that in more detail a little bit later. So in the Goblet of Fire, Harry had of course become a great Quidditch player and looked forward to the annual Quidditch games between the various houses to determine who would win the House Cup. But in the Goblet of Fire, that is canceled because Hogwarts is going to host the Tri-Wizard Tournament, a competition between wizards to see who was the best of the three houses. And of course Lord Voldemort knows all about this, and he sabotages the Tri-Wizard Tournament in order to kill Harry. And the result of that was that as Harry and Cedric Diggory get to the Tri-Wizard Cup and touch it at the same time, they are magically transported to this graveyard where Lord Voldemort is about to make his return by being what's supposed to be his body is dropped into this cauldron along with some of Harry Potter's blood and one of the bones of his late father and part of Wormtail's body. And so they get those things together and drop it all in the cauldron. Of course, Lord Voldemort arises, but before that had even happened, he'd ordered Wormtail to murder Cedric Diggory on spot, and they didn't even think anything about it. There's no remorse, no thought to it, just kill the spare. And it was just a cold-blooded murder right in front of Harry's eyes of a person who actually Harry and Cedric Diggory were moving toward becoming friends. They might have become great friends later on, and it was a tragedy in any case, but especially given the fact that they were sort of starting to move together and they were about to become friends. So Lord Voldemort rises, Cedric Diggory is murdered, but Harry defeats Voldemort once again, his return to Hogwarts. And then at that point it's obvious that the war between the rest of the wizarding community and the dark wizards is about to start up again. So we get to the Order of the Phoenix, and Harry and his cousin Dudley are attacked by Dementors in the village where or the town where Harry's living, Little Whinging, I think is the name of it. So Harry defends himself and his idiot cousin by conjuring up the Patronus, the magical creatures that fight off the Dementors. And so he's victorious in that way. But the Ministry of Magic finds out about this use of underage magic almost immediately, and they decide to put Harry on trial and consider expelling him and taking away his wand and possibly imposing who knows what other kind of horrible punishment. So one night before this hearing that is scheduled, a group of wizards show up at the front door, and included among that group Mad-Eye Moody, Professor Lupin, and Tonks, and Kingsley Shacklebolt, and some others, and they take Harry away to the home of Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, who had been discovered in a previous volume. And he learns about this organization called the Order of the Phoenix, which exists to fight against the Dark Lords. Well, the trial comes up, and Harry goes before this wizard Supreme Court, and he is acquitted through the efforts of Albus Dumbledore, and is then able to return to Hogwarts. But a lot went on during this time, and now that Voldemort's back, all kinds of serious issues are happening in the Wizarding world and the Muggle world. They are now in a state of open warfare. Well, many years ago, before Harry was born, this divination professor, Professor Trelawney, had made this prophecy about Voldemort and Harry, and she'd said that one could not live while the other survives. In other words, one would eventually have to kill the other one. But Voldemort didn't know the complete prophecy, the record of which was hidden at the Ministry of Magic in London. And these prophecies, the only people who could retrieve these records of prophecies were people about whom the prophecies were about. And Voldemort was not going to get into the Ministry of Magic on his own. He sent people who tried to get in, and they didn't make it. So he concocts this plan to lure Harry into the Ministry of Magic to retrieve this prophecy, because he wants to know exactly what the prophecy says concerning him and Harry. So he successfully lures Harry and his friends, Ron, Hermione, and the others, to the Ministry of Magic. During this time, Harry and Hermione and Ron have formed this group called Dumbledore's Army to train themselves in the defense against dark arts, because they weren't being allowed to learn about defense against dark arts. This woman, Dolores Umbridge, had been named High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, and Cornelius Fudge and the Ministry of Magic were just interfering right and left at Hogwarts, and basically just wrecking the school, as Cornelius tried to do his bureaucratic political thing to try to suppress the knowledge that Lord Voldemort had returned, to prevent chaos in the wizarding community. And so Dumbledore's army was formed, and Harry's able to train a lot of wizards in defense against dark arts before they are finally discovered. But Voldemort wants to know this prophecy, so he lures Harry and his friends to the Ministry of Magic by deceiving Harry into believing that he's captured Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, and Sirius is in significant danger. In fact, he's about to be killed. He's being tortured. And to make a long, complicated story rather short, Harry and his friends take off to London, and they do go to the Ministry of Magic in an attempt to rescue Sirius Black, who actually isn't there at this time. It's all a ruse perpetrated by Lord Voldemort. And so they get there, and almost as soon as they get to this Department of Mystery, Harry and his friends from Dumbledore's army, Ron, Hermione, and the rest, are set upon by these dark wizards, people who had escaped from the wizard prison, Azkaban, and were now on the loose. And this furious battle erupts, and as they were on the verge of being defeated by the dark wizards, the dark forces, in burst the Order of the Phoenix, this group that Dumbledore had founded many years ago to combat the dark arts. And a furious battle rages between the Order of the Phoenix and Harry and his friends and the Death Eaters, and eventually the Order of the Phoenix is victorious. But during the process of that, Harry's godfather, Sirius Black, with whom he'd become very close, is killed. And this was absolutely devastating. Harry's getting a lot of bad kicks in the stomach here or stabs, you might say. First his parents are dead, then he witnesses the murder of Cedric Diggory right in front of him, and then he loses his godfather, Sirius Black, who he'd only known for a couple of years, and they never were able to have much of a relationship because Sirius was thought to be a mass murderer. He'd been framed, actually, but in truth he was a member of the Order of the Phoenix. And so during this battle, Harry loses Sirius, and he's absolutely devastated. And there's this scene where Sirius has just been murdered, and Harry's in this total state of fury and shock, and Professor Lupin runs behind him and grabs hold of him and tries to, protect him. Lupin is definitely one of the good guys. He's one of the best. He's had a hard life, but Lupin is definitely one of the better people in the entire story up to this point. I've gotten through the Half-Blood Prince. But then Harry is furious. It was a deception. The record of the prophecy was destroyed during the battle at the Ministry of Magic, so Voldemort never got to hear it. But Dumbledore was the original person to hear the prophecy, and he now reveals it to Harry, and it turns out that Professor Trelawney, many years ago before Harry's birth, made this prophecy about the Dark Lord and this child who would be born who would have the power to defeat the Dark Lord. And actually it could have been one of two wizards. It could have been Harry Potter, or it could have been Neville Longbottom. Voldemort singled out Harry Potter and went after him and attacked his parents and tried to kill him. And in the process of time, the discussion about what all had happened, Dumbledore finally reveals this horrible truth that one day, according to this prophecy, Harry, who is on the good side, and Lord Voldemort, who is pure evil, one will ultimately have to kill the other. And at the culmination of the battle in the Ministry of Magic, Lord Voldemort had actually, for just a minute or two, possessed Harry. And it looked like Harry was struggling with this idea of becoming evil, but ultimately Lord Voldemort had to leave his body and disappear. And it's explained by Dumbledore that Voldemort could not possess Harry because Harry is fundamentally good and Voldemort is fundamentally evil, and the evil could not stand the presence of the good, and so Lord Voldemort had to leave. But there was this matter of having lost Sirius, and Harry was furious with Dumbledore that he hadn't been more open with him and explained some more of these things. And Dumbledore simply explained that he knew this prophecy all along, that one day one would have to kill the other. And he saw Harry laboring under this tremendous burden since he was at Hogwarts. His parents had been killed, and they'd lived with these horrible relatives, and things were just not good. And he explained that he just didn't want to burden Harry any more than he had to because he cared about him. I mean, everybody loves Harry Potter, great guy, and Dumbledore had a lot of affection for him, and he didn't want to burden him with the truth. But now Harry learns the truth, that, it's sort of a classic battle against good and evil, and that ultimately one day one is going to have to kill the other. And so now he's faced with this prospect that he has to tell his friends what's going to happen, and they are going to stand beside him. I love the scene at the end of the Order of Phoenix when the wizards confront the Dursleys. Harry's lost Sirius Black. He's lost his godfather, one person who was sort of a mentor and protector, and now he's going to be alone with the Dursleys for the summer. His family, his mother's family that he lived with, and the reason for that is rather complicated, why he had to live there in the summer, or at least return there once a year. But he was treated badly by the Dursleys. And at the closing scene in the Order of Phoenix, there at King's Cross Station, just got off the train, and the wizards from the Order of the Phoenix are there to meet Harry, and they go up and confront the Dursleys. And they inform, I won't take the time to read it because that would get a little bit of time consuming, but they inform the Dursleys in no uncertain terms that they better not treat Harry badly, because if they do, he's going to answer to them. And Uncle Vernon asked Mad-Eye Moody, "Are you threatening me?" He said, "Yes, sir, I am," basically. And if we ever hear, and Professor Lupin says, and make no mistake, we will find out about it. And then they tell them that they're going to show up and they're going to do something about it if Harry's mistreated, because Harry's got friends who care about him. And that's an important theme of this book. You have this situation where Harry's lost his parents, he's lost his godfather, he's witnessed the murder of Cedric Diggory, who's going to become his friend, and now he knows that one day probably he or Voldemort, one's going to have to kill the other, but now he's got to go home and face these evil, basically, Dursleys again, who've been mistreating him all these years. And the wizard community comes out in force, and they threaten the Dursleys in front of everybody right there at King's Cross Station. And then, as they move into this rather uncertain future, it's obvious by now that Harry's friends Ron and Hermione are going to stick with him to the end. And he's also got the support of a lot of other people in the wizard community. He still has Dumbledore, and there's the Order of Phoenix, and there's Remus Lupin, and Mad-Eye Moody, and Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Tonks, and all this wonderful crowd that have come around to support him. So a couple of things about this. Fudge, in his prosecution of Harry for underage magic, acted just like politicians that we see in the real world. I think of the Clintons when I see how Fudge acted. He just wanted to suppress the truth. He wanted to protect his own interest, and that's all he cared about, was protecting his own interest. He was a politician. He didn't want to, there were problems right under his eyes, and he didn't want to deal with it. He just wanted to take the easy route and make sure that he didn't get blamed. And you see that in real life politicians. So J.K. Rowling got it right. Maybe we'll talk more about that one of these days when we discuss the Half-Blood Prince. But here's a big lesson. This wonderful support team. Of course, by now we all care about Harry. We all love Harry. We want things to work out for him. So it's a really heartwarming scene when the wizards come out and they threaten the Dursleys and they warn them what's going to happen. And that gives us all a good feeling. But here's a kind of takeaway from that. This wonderful support team that is surrounding Harry to be protectors and friends and helpers and all of that in his very unusual circumstance, that can in fact happen in real life. Has it ever happened for you? It does happen sometimes. So not only are we seeing our favorite character get support from this wonderful crowd, but there are analogies in real life. There are, when people live in different or unusual circumstances or they experience tragedy, sometimes there are people who can come along and support and substitute and be a support team. That can happen in real life. So what we're looking at here in the Harry Potter series is a battle between good and evil. The battle between good and evil. And we're also seeing the power of love and the power of friendship. And there are some tremendous lessons that we could talk about, and that I will talk about a little bit later. But just remember, if you ever get into these series of these books, there are some striking parallels to real life. Things like that can happen. There can be people like these wizard friends who will come together and help a person when they need to, and will stick with you to the bitter end. That can happen. And that's one of the things that makes the Harry Potter series feel so good, in spite of this monster of evil, that we're seeing a battle, and it's moving toward a place where good is going to triumph. You can sort of see that already. And there really are good people out there who are willing to do what needs to be done, fulfill whatever role needs to be fulfilled to help people, good people, who need them. So that's my discussion on the Order of Phoenix. I'll return soon with a discussion on the Half-Blood Prince. Good day.